when I woke up that year, I was still a long ways from starting to make content. And during COVID, I invested in GameStop. And
invested.
Yeah.
Okay, not investigated.
No, I invested in GameStop.
Did you do good?
Well, I haven't sold. I still have all my shares. I've only collected more, and that's a whole other rabbit hole we can talk about another time. Because it's still...
You were not in the movie Eat the Rich, the documentary?
No, there's been a bunch of documentaries, and most of them have been made by the people with all the big money to try to contain the narrative of what's really going on. I'm actually currently working. I'm actually wearing the shirt from. We're working on a documentary that is funded by the community, by the investors themselves, that is being told from our own perspective, because there's a whole other storyline that has been deeply obfuscated about what was figured out. Because once I invested, then I started going online and looking into what everyone's looking into. And what GameStop did, it was not the first time this had happened, but GameStop was the first time that that a financial crime had harmed regular people, and those regular people had the internet to such a degree that a real hive mind started to form, investigating what's really going on in the stock market and in financial worlds in general. And it was so blatant and so memey that people from all walks of life got involved, and it started this tumbling snowball of investigation of we see this one crime, but it looks like there's crime here too. And it looks like this is fraudulent too. And
is the underlying crime the short selling of GameStop to drive it into valuelessness?
The naked short selling of GameStop is a big part of it. That's the most publicized part of it, meaning that the large financial institutions have the ability to just press a button and say, I can probably find a share, though I don't have it right now, and I'm going to borrow it when I find it, and I'm just going to sell it right now. So they can invent shares out of nothing, which is a money printer.
And that is naked short selling versus short selling, which is you actually borrow to sell.
Yeah, short selling is a sketchy idea, and it's not necessarily a great market mechanic in my opinion, but it's totally legal and it's totally fine. And there's nothing below board about short selling, but it's that the largest institutions have the ability to do it without actually having real shares. And so you start to invent fake shares, and the person that buys that share has just bought a share that never existed.
And that was when the people who investigated into it observed that the amount of being short selling far exceeded any actual...
That there was more than 200% of the shares that are supposed to exist, and we had them all. And that's why most of us have never sold, is because some people sold on the big run up if they made gains, but a lot of us have continued to buy shares because we know that the only way to get out of that short selling trap is to buy back the shares that you said you could find, and they can't find them because we have them all. And so along the journey, we've uncovered all kinds of other crimes, and the most just of the obvious level, where the dude that's in charge of the gigantic market maker called Citadel that is responsible for the exchange that GameStop is on. They're the ones that are responsible for exchanging all the GameStop shares on the stock market. He also runs a hedge fund under the same name called Citadel Hedge Fund, Citadel Securities. They're different companies, and they would never communicate under any circumstances. They would never collude. And the hedge fund Citadel is allowed to short sell, not naked. They would never naked short sell. They're allowed to short sell GameStop all they want, while their other business that they would never communicate with is the business responsible for making sure that GameStop trades are legit. And he just so happened to be involved with the person that turned off the buy button. So we whoa. And that's just the beginning. So we started to uncover all this crazy crime. And that was me starting to be I've woken up to that we've been lied to. And now I've woken up, we all know that money is the root of all the power in our world. And over the year, 2 or 3 years almost of kind of watching these people online, because I wasn't really doing the research myself. I was watching these other smarter people that understood the markets better, sort of put things together and put out research and kind of and meme and just pass the time. And eventually I just kind of got to the point where I was we've uncovered all this shit, and I've never seen a single TikTok video about it. I've never seen a single short form piece of content about this. We're contained in this little Reddit bubble. Why aren't we spreading this far and wide? And eventually I was fuck it, I'll do it. And I was initially planning on starting my whole platform talking about GameStop and talking about financial crime and all that stuff. But I sat down to make that first video and kind of was and I had an article open that someone else had done the research on, and I was going to try to translate it. And I kind of was thinking about how to go about this, and realized that I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. I didn't do this research, and I don't understand all these various parts of this complex analysis. And I'm just a smooth brained idiot. I should probably pump the brakes and start with just learning like the basics here, because I'm not actually the one doing all the research. I'm just reading it. And so I like scrapped that whole idea and started with just like, who owns like, how does this all work? And I started with really basic questions, which is why my content really quickly appealed to huge amounts of people, because I just started digging into the questions that we all have of like, who owns all the companies that we use every day? How do stock trades work? How does money work? And that quickly led to things like the CIA and Jeffrey Epstein and all, the rest was history.
It is amazing because like I can remember the time where there's some questions that are so basic, but you don't even know that they should be asked. Like, okay, you talk about a judge, who appointed the judge? And until you even know that that's the first question to ask, you don't even ask it.
Is he allowed to get money or not?
Yeah,
like,
who supported him if he wasn't appointed? Who donated to his campaign? So the GameStop is fascinating. You still hold.
Oh yeah, and there's much more coming down the pipe very soon about it. Yeah, in case you see GameStop in the news in the next month or so. What is about it?
What is it currently trading at?
Around $20. They did a split, so it's like $80 kind of
a 4-to-1, or
they did a 4-to-1 split. So now they've been hovering around $20 for a long time. Damn, but I'm not really looking at the price. I'm not really concerned about the price, because there's a way bigger thing going on behind the scenes where like. All I'll say is that I don't believe, and I've been a journalist digging into finding sources, like getting deep close. This is not just me totally speculating, but I don't believe that Ryan Cohen sold Chewy and got that huge payday and then decided he wanted to be in charge of a video game company. He has way bigger aspirations, and he's on a way bigger plan than that.
The GameStop still has. It's not going bankrupt. It still has some basic underlying fundamentals.
Yeah, I mean, he turned one of the things we learned is that the playbook of these big market funds, these big money managers, hedge funds, and the bigger boys, is they found out that they can make a ton of money by infiltrating a company's board and then gutting it for parts and sort of like extracting all the monetary value inside of a company and then leaving. And they did it to Toys R Us famously. Bain Capital is one of the first examples where Mitt Romney was involved in Bain Capital at the time. And they get people on the board, and then you do things like you sell off all the property that the company owns, and then you lease it back to them, but you just happen to sell it to your buddy. And then you start to like do weird stock buybacks and weird payouts to the shareholders, which just so happens to be you. And you basically mismanage the company into the ground in ways that makes you get really, really rich. But because you're just, you're hired by the company, you aren't the company. When the company goes bankrupt, it's like, it was already on the way down. We tried to save it, but we couldn't. And it happened to Toys R Us, but then it happened to lots of other companies over the years, and no one really noticed until GameStop. And we noticed that, like, actually, a lot of these people have done this multiple times. And the board of directors at GameStop, for all these years when it was getting shorted into the ground, they were mismanaging it, like, really grossly.
To the detriment of GameStop, but to the potential benefit of other interrelated companies in which they have
companies. And not to mention to the huge benefit of Amazon.com, which is repeatedly gobbling up the market share of all of these other people. And Jeff Bezos was not a librarian before he started Amazon.com. He was in hedge funds. So he knows all these people, which is a side note. But
I'm taking mental note of all of the side notes. So let me just see what I look like with my knee bent here.
And
I can't do it. I'm putting it down.
When Ryan Cohen got into GameStop, he knew that was going on, and he got rid of all those board members. Like, he wrote a letter expressing to them that, like, you guys are ruining this and it's your fault. And like, I'm a major shareholder. And he kind of forced his way in, got rid of them all, and he's over the last several years, while he's been doing stuff in the background on a different track, he's also been making GameStop financially solvent. And now they have billions of dollars of cash in the bank. They're profitable again. They're doing fine. They're not going anywhere. So there's really like no thesis under which I'm concerned about GameStop anymore, which is why I'm super chill with my shares, not concerned. But I also know a little bit about what the bigger play is, because the shorts never closed and there's other stuff going on. It's a whole.
The shorts never closed.
Yeah, the shorts never closed.
Did they not need to close within the certain short time frame?
Well, no. So short selling, it's kind of like taking out a loan, in the sense that you can usually keep your short position open as long as you want. There's no reason you have to close it. You pay interest on it over time. And so it costs money to keep your short position open for a long period of time.
Who had the biggest short in the GameStop?
It's not exactly clear who had the biggest short, because you don't have to report a lot of this stuff, and that you can do all kinds of crazy shit we discovered. And it's not like no one knew this, it's just that no one would talk about it. But there is a whole array of trade types called swaps. And swaps is basically just a financial word and I'm not getting super technical, I'm just kind of giving the broad strokes here, but a swap is basically any type of contract where you and I agree on the terms of a deal, financially speaking, and we both sign it and say that's good. And they're basically unregulated, and they can be like, I have, 1 million shares of GameStop on my books, and you have 1 million shares of IBM, and I want to have IBM on my books, and I don't want the GameStop on my books. Just because, whatever reason, I don't want people to know or whatever, we sign a swap contract and we exchange that part of our books for whatever the term of that swap is. There's lots of kinds of swaps, and they can be used to hide positions. They can be used to hide short positions. And at first, this was like a tinfoil conspiracy theory. And then this dude named Bill Hwang blew up his fund called Archegos Capital Management. It's one of these really big hedge funds, multi-billion-dollar fund, because he was using all these crazy swap contracts with multiple different counterparties that didn't know he was swapping with the other counterparties to basically just manipulate securities left and right. And one of his big swaps was shorts on GameStop. And when he blew up, it was because GameStop's price was going crazy. And that blew up all of his other trades. And he's the reason why Credit Suisse, which is one of the largest financial institutions in the world, went bankrupt, because they were the counterparty for a ton of these swaps without knowing how toxic it all was. Maybe, allegedly, or maybe they did know. I don't know. And then when he blew up, they're left with this giant bag and a dude that can't pay the other end of the deal. And they have all these toxic swaps, many of which are shorts on GameStop, which are still fucked. And so they blow up. And then UBS was forced in this weird deal that was like somewhat publicized and somewhat secret to absorb Credit Suisse because Switzerland was about to fucking collapse. Like literally Switzerland almost collapsed because Bill Hwang was using these crazy swaps on GameStop shorts as well as other companies. And he blew up, so Credit Suisse blew up. So Switzerland was about to blow up, and they did this crazy deal where UBS had to absorb Credit Suisse as well as all of their positions. And there's all this weird language in the public filings about that exchange that kind of allude to them being like, we don't fucking want this stuff. Don't put this on our balance sheet. But it's, to my knowledge, UBS is now holding the leftovers of that whole fucked up trail. And that's just one dude. And there was tons of people shorting GameStop to a tune way higher than him. So when does the part 2.0 of this story come out? I'm expecting it by the end of this year. And I have that on relatively solid rumor mill, like journalism type information, but also it's an extremely complicated world, and the people that are on the hook for this shit will do anything within their power to live under, to quote Ken Griffin, one of the big bad guys of the saga, you have to do anything to live to fight another day. And that's how he described how he survived the 2008 financial crisis. And I'm sure that is how he is surviving the 2021.
Now, when you said Ken Griffin, I was thinking Peter Griffin. Who's Ken Griffin?
No, Ken Griffin he's the leader of Citadel. Okay. He was like the scapegoat for the whole GameStop thing. And he is a horrible dude. He's a horrible dude. Piece of shit. Fuck you, Ken. But there's lots of other people that are also involved, that are also complicit. Ken is just the scapegoat because he was immediately identified, and he was directly tied to the dude, Vlad Tenev, that turned off the buy button at Robinhood. It came out, Ken lied under oath when he said they had no communication, because it later came out that there was direct communication between Citadel employees and Robinhood, basically saying, we're going to do this because they were fucked if they didn't. So